welcome to John L. Scott Facebook Friday. This is James Colburn, your host, and I'm so excited about today. We are a third-generation rock star real estate firm, actually ranked 15th largest brokerage in the United States, led by our fearless third-generation leader, Lennox J. Scott. We're ranked top 3 in technology in the country with 3,300 agents and brokers and over 110 offices in all California, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. Just to send some context for the show, because many of you, this helps, right? Just to understand what we're going to get out of today is that we're going to be able to meet with someone that is an expert in pipeline development and what he calls creating a predictable pipeline, which is super sexy in the real estate business. He's his name's Matt Heinz. He is president of and founder of Heinz Marketing, and he is a nationally recognized author, including his new book, as I mentioned, Predictable Pipeline. He's an award-winning blogger. As you can tell, he's got a fancy mic there, or you will be able to see that. And then he's helped companies like Amazon and Seagate and Morgan Stanley and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to name only a few. Correct, Matt? You also have experience with House Values, which became market leader in Microsoft. Matt lives in a 105-year-old farmhouse in Kirkland that he renovated with his wife, Beth, and he has 3 children, a cat, a dog, some 7 chickens. Yeah. Is that still the case, Matt?
Still the case. It was 8 and then had a little coyote incident, so we're down to 7.
Okay, and then
producing eggs.
Right, and some rabbits, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Just to make it interesting.
So welcome Matt Heinz to this show. This is going to be an awesome show. And by the way, you and I grabbed a call earlier this week. You had just finished mowing the lawn, and we're talking instant rapport with you. And we weren't even on Zoom, right?
No.
The connection was heavy. And some of these shows, you don't know what you're getting into with you. I'm not worried. We're going to get through this hour perfectly, provide an intense amount of value for our office leaders, our managers, our owners, our agents. So thank you so much for joining us. I want to start out, Matt, by asking you to share a little bit about your experience with Lennox. You actually, way back when, early on in your career, interviewed Lennox, and I'd love the group to hear about that and to know about that.
Yeah, so I was a journalism and political science major out of UW. My first job was I was a reporter for the Bremerton Sun. I was actually stationed in Olympia, and so I consider myself a writer and reporter. And I joined Microsoft a few years later, and I was working in MSN, and I was working in what was then Home Advisor. And we were trying to build a real estate channel for MSN, and part of my job was to work with the real estate group to sort of evangelize putting listings on the web. And so today it feels like table stakes. It was like 16, 17 years ago. It was not, right? I mean, the MLSs were still worried about what the internet was going to do. Bill Gates was seen as someone who had disintermediated travel agents and was going to do that to real estate agents. And that, in our group, that wasn't the play at all. And Lennox was one of the only brokers in the country at that time that really saw that this was a great thing for the brokerage, a great thing for agents. And so I was charged with kind of writing early adopter stories. And I distinctly remember going to Lennox's office. I'm like, I don't know, I'm in my mid-early 20s, and like I'm going to like John L. Scott's office, not just John L. Scott's
the
office,
man's office, right?
The Lennox, right? So could not have been nicer, could not have been more gracious. Give us a great story. And Lennox, I don't know if you remember, you probably don't remember this, but I remember asking you, because I think third generation, remember asking like, is there a 4th generation? Like, do you have a son that's going to take over? And you broke into the biggest smile. He said, no, daughter. I said, I got a daughter who, if she wants to, is going to be in the business. And I haven't talked to you forever since then. So, and I'd asked you, so is 16 years ago, what were we doing? And I got a brief update on Savannah, and I was very happy to hear that things are moving on that track. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was great. And of course, it always, it's yesterday I was on a call with Lennox and I had mentioned that, kind of teed him up there for that and how cool that was and how you were excited to be able to come back with us and find out if that was actually the case. And that's the real storied part of our brand, right? So from a story brand standpoint, I mean, that's an incredible part of it. And certainly leveraging opportunity for all of our owners and agents out
I
there.
mean,
So
just as someone like I grew up in the California, in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I moved up here to go to UW, been living here ever since. I mean, John L. Scott, I mean, just from an outside perspective, I mean, it's an icon, right? I mean, you guys have been around for a long time. It's an institution in the market. And I'm not a brand marketer. I'm a pipeline marketer. I'm more of a sort of a sales and marketing guy. But I mean, you can't buy the kind of brand equity and the kind of brand value that John L. Scott has built over the years, through the work that you do, through the longevity that you've had, through the quality of experiences people have, and the story and longevity of a family-owned business. It's amazing.
when we met earlier this week, you actually said, and I have a quote down here, most companies lack the resource to create an iconic brand as JLS. And so that opportunity that we all have as a part of that story, I mean, an incredible way to start this conversation around pipeline today. And pipeline for many agents and our owners, pipeline for both sales as well as recruitment pipelines for new agents within an office is elusive, right? There's this elusive creation of pipeline. And then we've got this award-winning blogger and a guy that writes a book about predictable pipelines. The word predictable is super attractive to all of us in this business. You did some time at House Values. Tell us how that kind of shaped where you are today with Heinz Marketing.
Well, as much as we were, and my part of my job was working with, brokers like Lennox and some of the MLSs to get the listings online. Ultimately, we were a consumer website. So we were working with, home buyers and sellers. And to do that well, we needed to understand home buyers and sellers better. And, people, as you guys will know, people don't wake up in the morning and decide, I'm going to buy a house today. It is a very long process. And so we did some pretty deep research into how long that process takes. And I remember at one point we identified that for first-time home buyers, from the time they start thinking, well, maybe I should move away from renting, or maybe I should buy a house, the average process, I think this is like 15 years ago, it was like 23 months. And so this is not something people decide to do right away, but the passive in my brain thinking about my commute stinks, my yard's too small, I want to do something, eventually we're going to get married and we're going to have kids, and so we're thinking about that, I really want to garden. I mean, all those things start well before people start looking at listings, let alone saying, I need to find a realtor who can help guide me through this process. And so that really taught me, that was my first lesson in buying journeys and what I think about as a buying journey. And as a marketer now who focuses on that, I think a lot about the beginning of a buying journey starts with a loosening of the status quo, right? Your prospect starts thinking that what they're doing today, what they're living through today, isn't as optimal as what it felt like yesterday. And back in the old days when we were doing Home Advisor, it was things like, I'm really getting tired of my commute. I'm really getting tired of this tiny house. I want to have a yard. I want to be able to entertain outside. I want to, be closer to my kids' school. Whatever that is, those are things people think about. And sometimes people naturally start loosening that status quo. Sometimes you, as an outside trusted expert, can say, here are the signs that may be telling you should do something different. You can introduce some of those challenges to the status quo. And when you can do that, and when you can sort of guide someone through that decision-making process, you are now a trusted advisor. You are now the incumbent to help them through the transaction as well.
That's great. Yeah, it's great. So you write this book about predictable pipeline. This actually is your fifth book, Matt.
Yeah.
Share with us a little bit about that book and the journey that will take us through, because I'm sure there's a lot of people on this show today that want to have a copy of that.
Well, I mean, this is my fifth. This is the first one I've had with an actual publisher. The first four were just self-published, and I can't I can't recommend that process enough, honestly. Like if you thought you wanted to write a book, I mean, you can put something together. I use a tool called lulu.com, LULU.com. Amazon has a separate version that they offer now as well. But you upload a manuscript in a formatted Word document. You upload a PDF of your cover. Tell them how many pages the book is. It tells you exactly what the binding should be and everything. And you can do a print run of one. You can print one copy of your book, or you can print 10, or you can print 40, whatever. And there's a big difference between having a blog and maybe having a PDF of something and having a book you can hold.
Yeah.
Like even if it's just a paperback, like that is legit.
Yeah.
And I think for everyone on this call, like I mean, if all you are is the keeper of the listings, if all you are is someone that can open up a house and give people open houses, that's a commodity. But your ability to be an expert in the neighborhood, your ability to be a guide for someone along this process, your ability to come in and say, I am empathetic to, and I am an expert in the issues that first-time home buyers go through, or the issues that East Side sellers go through, or the issue that condo buyers go through, whatever that is, whatever your market or your sphere is. Like writing a book on that topic gives you an incredible amount of legitimacy, and to a certain extent, like you could argue it's optics, right? Because like I've seen a lot of people that write books that are quite frankly shysters and don't actually have the ideas behind them and how it goes written or whatever. But I mean, as a marketer, you think about what's going to give you credibility. You think about what's going to differentiate you from someone else. Your ideas, examples of your ideas, and the value you can provide someone is very, very powerful.
Yeah, it's a business card on steroids for sure, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us about the book, Predictable Pipeline.
So this new book, I was fortunate enough to get it published with Wiley. We were originally going to publish it this November. Looks like this is going to be an interesting fall, and the conference I was going to launch it at is no longer a live conference, so we pushed it to February of next year. But this is based on having worked with literally hundreds of companies over the last 12 years since I started Heinz Marketing, and realizing that most companies are doing kind of random acts of sales and marketing, right? And back, when I was at House Values and what became Market Leader, we talked about it oftentimes as sort of the roller coaster of generating your pipeline as a realtor, as a broker, right? I mean, okay, I'm not busy, I don't have any listings, I better go do some marketing, right? So you make a bunch of phone calls, you do some marketing, you get some interest, you get some listings. Now I'm busy with transactions. Now I got some deals I'm working through, and my focus is getting those deals done. And what do I stop doing? The marketing. So now I get those deals done, and now I don't have a pipeline anymore, right? And so it's sort of back and forth. And we see that across every industry. Like we talk to a lot of large B2B companies in a bunch of industries, and they're doing the same thing. The sales team is busy with their pipeline and they're not prospecting. Or, the marketing team is busy getting this trade show set up for the, 2 months from now. And so isn't doing any other marketing, focuses only on the trade show. It maybe does great, but then there's a desert after that, right? It's sort of like sitting in the rain shadow of a good event. Now there's nothing coming after that. And so that inconsistent sales and marketing effort creates lumpiness in the pipeline, and it creates a lack of confidence in what's coming next. Like we all stumble into deals, every one of us, right? Someone randomly calls us back. Even if we didn't follow up, they randomly call us back, or out of the blue, someone responds to something and it becomes our biggest sale of the year, fine. But those things oftentimes, unfortunately, give us false confidence. They give us false confidence that more will come like that. If you're just waiting for the phone to ring, that is not a strategy. And if you're honest with yourself at the end of a month or at the end of a quarter or the end of a year, and you say, listen, I had a good year, I had a good quarter. In all honesty, look into the mirror and say, what is my confidence that I have a system in place right now to do that again? What is my confidence that I have the pipeline in place to do that again? So, and again, we're seeing this in companies, big, small. We're seeing, realtors, financial advisors, Fortune 500, B2B marketing organizations all face similar challenges. And what we realize in looking at those that do it the best, that create predictable pipeline, it wasn't that they just make more phone calls. It wasn't just that they send more emails and do more stuff. It was that they had a foundation in place of understanding their customer, of understanding the buying process, of deploying a consistent content marketing program in many cases that delivers constant value to the market and if focused in the right place and with the right volume based on your sales goals, can deliver the predictable pipeline back in your organization. Now, I can say all that on this event, and you can read the book and it can all sound like it'll work. It is hard work. It is, look, it's gonna be, the sausage making isn't always pretty, but the companies that invest in that foundation are far more likely to be successful and consistently successful than those that just keep doing the random acts of marketing.
The thing that we learned with real estate agents in general and real estate brokers is that hard work is super hard until it pays off. Then all of a sudden the hard work is massively worth it, right? So, you and I talked about this consistent content strategy and really just knowing where our customers are. Can you further describe that? And I'm feeling like with agents and brokers in our organization and in any organization, there's really just like the first thing you could do, right? It's kind of like the first thing is driving to the gym to work out, right? Unless you're in the middle of COVID and the gyms are closed. But there's there's that first driving to the gym, right? Gets you there. Is there a first thing that in every single one of our agents and brokers could do?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll give you two because I think they're related. The first one is to be really clear about your metrics. And what I mean by that is how many deals do you need to close? How many deals are you targeting to close? Or you can do it either based on how many deals you want to close or how much money you want to make, right? And then you work back from that and say, okay, well, how many deals do I need to have in my pipeline? How many prospective buyers do I need to have in my pipeline, buyers or sellers in my pipeline? And to get to that pipeline, how many leads do I need to be working? How many qualified leads that meet my criteria do I need to be working? Right? And in your case, it may actually be simple. Like oftentimes with our B2B clients, we think, okay, how many of the right people in the right company am I talking to? That's a lead. An opportunity might be we maybe together have identified a short-term opportunity, a short-term problem that needs to be solved, right? So maybe they haven't signed, they haven't listed their house yet, but they've said like, no, we really need to do this. That becomes a short-term opportunity. How many of those do you need to get to active buyers or active sellers that actually sort of go through the process and close? So doing that math helps you not only sort of clarify, here's the number I want to hit, but gives you a number of what you now need to go generate. Because otherwise, if all you're doing is saying, I got to go do marketing, I got to go make some more prospecting calls, like how many is enough, right? Like I had a friend, or he became a friend, he runs a sales training company in San Diego, and he had this challenge. It was just him and a couple people helping him. And he's like, I need a better pipeline. And when we did all that math, the answer to all that math was 2. He needed to go talk to and engage 2 new people every day. And if he did that with the right people, he was going to get enough over the course of the month, over the course of the quarter. He didn't need to close that many deals. Like based on his deal size and his company size, he didn't need that many deals. But we did the math to say every day, 2 new engagements, right? And that means you're following up with yesterday's and you're following up with the other people you've talked to. So that's not the only marketing work you're doing. But it said it wasn't 1, it wasn't 17, it was 2. Mm-hmm. So whatever that math looks like is the starting point to give you a basis of where you need to focus. The second part of that is knowing what counts in that math. Not all prospects are the same. On our website, you can download a bunch of research and best practice guides and all kinds of stuff. And we get 30 to 35 people a day that will come download those things. A single-digit % of those leads are what I consider qualified. Meaning they're the people from the kind of companies that I think we can do business with. I use this example facetiously, but it really happened. Like I had a dentist in South Carolina, download one of our content marketing guides. Like we mostly sell to, growth phase, mid-market B2B companies. I don't have anything for a dentist, right? So I don't mind, like it doesn't cost me anything for a dentist to find our content guide and to download it, but I better not count that as one of my leads that's going to fit into that model that I talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. So to know how many leads you need is one thing. To know who counts as a lead is at least as important, if not more important. Like who is a good prospect for you? What are you focused and best at doing? Are you focused on new buyers? Are you focused on the east side? Are you focused on condos? Are you focused on farmland? Like where do you focus? And then all of those leads that matter to you in that pipeline have to meet that criteria.
Well, definitely the idea of, we had Trevor Moad on the show a few weeks back. He's a mental conditioning coach for star elite athletes. And he mentioned this concept of if you go to the market and you don't have a grocery list, what happens, right? So kind of the same idea where if we go to the market and there's no grocery list, we're standing and staring at popsicles for 10 minutes, and we come back with a bunch of stuff we didn't want, and then we forgot the thing we actually went in to buy. Right, it takes us longer and we're inefficient. Same idea here, right? Get clear on what you want is what you basically said, because that'll order your efforts. Of course, there's like that first step, right? When as you're talking, I'm thinking, hold on. So you're basically suggesting you guys, you can make your own pipeline, and it can be predictable. I don't care if it's recruiting or if it's sales. You don't need a market leader. You don't need a Zillow. Is that what you're basically telling us?
Not quite. What I'm saying is the math is the math, right? I don't care where you get your qualified leads, but you need qualified leads. So if you, for instance, if you have built a content marketing program for yourself that is either leveraging content from John L. Scott or licensing content from somewhere else, or maybe you're a writer, maybe you're a podcaster, maybe you're doing videos on your website or your social profiles. And if you do that consistently, you get an audience. And if you do that content that is focused, that content that is intended specifically for that audience that you address, your audience a higher percent of your audience starts to be people that are in your wheelhouse, that are companies you want to do business with. And what I'm saying is over time, you can build your own demand gen engine.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I said those 30, 35 people every day, only 1% of them are qualified. Well, I don't have a very big business. And so that inbound engine drives an awful lot of what I need.
Right.
So I don't have to go buy a lot of leads from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that engine built and you have a number that exceeds what you naturally have coming through your business, those leads have to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And it's been a long time since I paid attention to what, Zillow's doing, and I don't even know who else. Back in the day, it was back in the day, it was like Home Advisor or Home Advisor and Realtor.com, and then it was, I don't know, like Brad Inman had something. There was all kinds of crazy stuff. But whether you use the newspaper or whether you do a direct mail campaign or whether you partner with the neighborhood community, there's a million things you can do. But it starts with what's your number, who are the prospects that you care about, and where can you find them? Where can you find them to engage with them?
All right. So
James?
Yes, Lennox.
Yeah, I've got a question. Matt, thanks for being here. This is fabulous.
Good.
So what I'm hearing the problem is inconsistent consistency.
Yeah.
That's what we're putting out here. But it's and you've taken a look at the real estate world, and in your book, how do you get that set time each day, or the mindset, or the discipline, the habit?
Yeah.
Because it's got to be quick glance, aren't we? It used to be, if something wasn't the 2-minute rule, if it wasn't available in 2 minutes, it was gone. Now it's down to a 2-second rule. If it's not right there, right now, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And are you addressing this, or what are you seeing around this?
It's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. So a lot of well-intentioned companies, a lot of well-intentioned realtors say like, okay, I did the math. I know what I need to do. Okay, I'm going to build my own engine. I'm going to start blogging. I'm going to start using Facebook. I'm going to start doing a video series. And then you get busy. And then you get a couple listings and you're focused on getting those deals done. And then you stop doing the other stuff. Especially for those of you that are realtors or office owners. I mean, there's no other infrastructure. There's no safety net. I'm a business owner myself. There's no safety. If I don't get deals, like, everybody starves. So I have to do it, right? And so there's a motivation that says, like, this is something I have to do to hit my future number. But then you have to build a discipline into your day and a discipline into how you work to make this happen. Let me give you a couple examples just from my world and how I do this. Because I mean, I started my business 12 years ago. It was just me and a laptop and a bus pass, just doing business with a couple Seattle-based businesses. We do work with companies all over North America now. We're 14 people. We've grown pretty nicely. I don't have a sales team. I've never had someone doing sales. I don't have a dedicated marketing person. Like, we do a lot of content. I do a lot of speaking. I've created a system that's helped us build pipeline, but that system requires feeding every day. couple of examples. This is my daily do list. And if you want a copy of this, I will be happy to send it to you. I know you probably can't read it. It is laminated because I used to travel a lot and I wanted to have a copy that wasn't going to get chewed up. This reminds me every day of the things I need to be doing. I have had a version of this for years and I still want it with me every day. I still want it laminated with me. And it reminds me to get that email alert I get in the morning from Facebook that says whose birthday it is. It reminds me to say happy birthday to them. Not on Facebook. I either send them an email or leave them a voicemail. Right? It reminds me to go into, for me at least, to go into LinkedIn, and I've got some saved searches in LinkedIn to see who new now qualifies for some of those saved searches based on things they've done on LinkedIn that tells me I should follow up with them. I've got in my calendar, we use Exchange, Microsoft, and I still use Outlook for email. I use tasks for Outlook, and I have a daily task every work day that literally says daily do. So my task list for the day will have, random one-off things that I need to get done those days, but it also has the daily do. And once I do it, I click complete and it just moves to the next day. On Monday, it moves to Tuesday. On Thursday, it moves to Friday. On Friday, it moves to Monday. And it's a reminder that it sits there until I do this. Yeah. And, even as we have leads coming in from other places, and we've got partners that, will generate leads for us, and we've got private equity companies we partner with that will bring their portfolio companies to us. I can't wait for other people. There's been a lot of focus on inbound marketing. You build content, people will come to you. Well, you don't have control over quantity and quality of who comes to you inbound. This is what you have control over, doing this every day. Yeah. So, and again, if it's one thing to have it all laminated. This is great unless it just sits in here and I don't do anything with it. If I ignore my daily do list every day, it doesn't matter how organized this is. So it does just come down to personal accountability and just being disciplined enough to do it. Now, I will say though, Lennox, you did mention well, how do you find time to do this? Well, you have to find time, one. Two, by being organized around what's on this list, instead of taking a half a day, if you really shut everything off, 20, 25 minutes. I mean, instead of spending money on marketing, instead of spending money where other companies buy leads, instead of paying money for a salesperson in my case, if I know that if I do these things based on the numbers I need to hit, that's my investment in our growth.
Hey, James, can I do a quick follow-up question? Matt, you got yourself into this position of doing your do list every day. What triggered that for you? What happened? Was there a seminar or a awakening you went through? What triggered you to ingrain this discipline into your day-to-day business practice?
A couple things. Back when I was still at House Values, this startup, and I got invited to a seminar by David Allen, and I didn't know the guy at all. He wrote a book called Getting Things Done. Had never heard of it. Was invited last minute because someone else canceled. And they're like, "Well, Matt, you're usually a list guy. Why don't you come? You seem to always trying to DIY organizational structures." The book Getting Things Done. I mean, I read a lot. Transformational for me, changed my life. And it was an organizational system I still partially follow that helped me separate projects from tasks, helped me think about tasks that I can do in different contexts. For example, I have different to-do lists based on whether I'm online or offline. I have a to-do list of things that I can only do at home or only do at the office. And then every week I've got a running project list. And the project list is basically any active short-term initiative in my life, in my business, in my home, personally, that I'm focused on. And on Sunday nights, put the kids to bed, pour a little scotch, I print out that list. And I go through it and make sure that I have next steps somewhere in my task list for the things that matter to me that week. Now, some things, if I'm getting on a plane and going off to a conference, and on that list is clean the garage, I can ignore it for a week. It's not clean the garage this week, right? But I want to make sure that I'm staying active on those things that matter to me. And there are things on there that are just like some of our, annual or quarterly initiatives in the business that I have to look at and say, am I doing that? Am I making progress on that? Did I do what I said I was going to do last week? If I did I follow up on the next step? If not, well, now I do, right? And I can schedule the next step. So the David Allen Getting Things Done system was part of that. I would also say, this sheet gets updated at least twice, 3 times a year. And it started a lot shorter, and so it's 12 years of just figuring this stuff out. Yeah. And I think early on I realized, look, like I mentioned, I'm a journalist by trade. And when I started my business, I didn't have any budget, but I could write. So I started a blog and I started a newsletter, and I finally figured out like what I could potentially do on Twitter. And I realized after a time, these things were building an audience for me. And just by chipping away day by day, when I started my business, my network was the people I worked with and the people I used to work with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now most of my business comes from my network. And it's, I mean, you know, we've got like 120,000 people on our newsletter lists and similar number on Twitter. Like our numbers are, if I just list them, they sound pretty interesting. It's taken 12 years of daily work. Like every morning you put on your hard hat, you do this stuff. You know, my parents from the Midwest, they taught me to just put my hard hat on and do the hard work and be humble and be kind and be empathetic. And there's the elevator to success it's broken. It's out of order. You got to take the stairs. And so you just got to do these things.
Take the stairs. Love that.
So like I said, it wasn't sort of some big, you know, other than getting things done and occasionally, you know, reading a book or seeing someone where it makes these, it's mostly incremental. It's been just incremental changes where I've just sort of continued to evolve what works for me, but it would stop working if I stopped doing it, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. You know, you and I talked about our housing updates that Lennox prepares for, I've lost count, Nick, how many, 50 plus areas? Yep, he's shaking his head, yes. And how that trusted advisor and being able to provide an item of value to our pipeline in a steady, consistent way is a surefire slam dunk way to produce business long-term and revenues for our businesses. Can you explain the kind of the value that creates and more about what you meant there?
Well, earlier I was talking about buying journeys and sort of challenging the status quo. Oftentimes a challenge of the status quo or a reframe of a problem comes from data. The insights is something that you see in the market. So people experience their own world, what they do, what they see, that's their status quo. And if you say, well, something's about to change, if they haven't experienced that, they may not believe you. But if you can show them that many people like them have been going through this transformation already or have been thinking about this, that you, Mr. Buyer Seller, you, Mr. Homeowner, may not be the early adopter, but change is coming, my friend. I almost said winter is coming, but that's a negative. It sounds bad. Yeah. But like, you know, listen, the things are changing. And in what we see by talking to a lot of people like you that, you know, just got married and are thinking about building a family, what we often hear is the data says they're doing X, Y, and Z. Or the data says that they want to prioritize these couple things, right? You know, every homeowner, every business is experiencing those insights, is experiencing the status quo just in isolation. Yeah. They're looking at their same four walls of their house or their office, but you've seen this movie before. You know what the buying journey looks like. And if you have trend data that can enlighten them on what's to come to sort of help reframe a problem or reframe a situation, that doesn't mean they're going to list with you this afternoon, but it starts planting the seeds of doubt. It sowing the seeds of saying like, I hadn't thought about it that way. What might that mean for me? You're not going to convince someone to have that insight right away, but if you give them data to help them think about and personalize that for themselves, then you've got something. There's a book called The Challenger Sale that I think is one of the best sales books written in the last 10, 15 years. And it talks about this methodology called teach, tailor, take control. You create a teachable moment for your prospects. You educate them on something they didn't know about. You do that gracefully. You do that with respect, right? This is not a hierarchical situation. I've seen a lot of people take that teach moment and be like, well, here's why you're dumb. Here's why you're wrong, right? You don't tell your prospect they're wrong, but you help them see something different. You take that insight and you customize that to them. Say, well, here's the insight. Here's the teachable moment. Let me tailor that to your situation, in part by asking you questions so I can do that. If you get them past the point where they have loosened their status quo, the next step is a commitment to change. You know, and even after you've committed to change, you may not know where you're moving. You may not even have chosen a realtor yet, right? But if you've committed to change, that is the hardest and most important part of the buying process. And that commitment, and because if you don't have that, if you don't have a commitment to change based on a certain desired outcome, and it's based on certain data that makes the prospect more confident in making that decision, then it's more likely the prospect is going to not follow through, right? If it's a house built on sand where they weren't really fully committed to the outcome, they just thought it was a good idea, something else comes along, they're not going to keep moving on it. But if they're committed to change for something that is truly valuable for them, they're more likely to stick through it. The book was called The Challenger Sale. And I would highly encourage it. For people that are in sales and marketing as a profession, which every one of you are, I would highly recommend it. The other book for people that aren't sales and marketing professionals that has a very similar message is a book called To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink. Another really good book.
Oh, well, thank you. So, you and I talked a fair bit about video, and actually you used a term that I love, which is anymore these days, we're just taking walking selfies, which is, if you call it a video, it kind of sounds heavy, but calling it just a walking selfie and just the value that you were talking about, like that imperfection equals approachability.
Oh,
so,
yes.
how video can create such a pipeline instantly through approachability and obviously showing empathy. So could you share a little more on that?
Yeah, I think, and honestly, what we've all had to do in the last couple of months of not being in the office, like I all used to be really just self-conscious of the craft closet behind me here, working in my little home office dug-in basement. I don't know if you can hear, like at the top of the stairs, my boys are arguing about who knows what, right? And I'm like, can you hear that? I mean, so I try to close the door. Sometimes that works. I mean, we're human. We're working from home. We're trying to get through this, And so I think that there is a level of, I wouldn't call it informality. Like I'm wearing a collared shirt. Like I think you still want to present, right? But there's a level of humanity that I think we now are sort of being forced in many cases to show people that is helping create connections between us. And the other way you can do that is just by, in your writing and in your content, you don't have to formalize it. Like write an email, write a letter to your prospects the way you would talk to them. Do a podcast and don't worry about editing it. Like if you cough in the middle of it or if someone interrupts you, like that's what happens, right? And I think videos can be the same way. Like I do all kinds of videos where, I've got this behind me, or sometimes I'll do it standing outside. Like I've kind of unconsciously, I started doing this and someone called it out. I'm like, oh, I actually kind of am doing that. I'm going to keep doing it. We live on, we're in Juanita in North Kirkland, and we've got a little less than a half acre here. We live in this old house, and my wife is an amazing gardener. She's got stuff all over the place here. And so I've gotten in the habit of doing a video with something that she's planted behind me. And half the time people are saying, oh, that's a beautiful hydrangea. I'm like, it is? I didn't know what that was. It's just pretty. And so things like that make you a little more interesting and a little more approachable.
And then the empathy thing. Explain.
Yeah, I think, if you're approachable, if you seem like someone that, if you smile, if you're someone that sort of just allows people to see your personality, that's who you are. If they're going to come, especially in your business, if they're going to come work with you, they're going to see that a lot, so I want them to like what they see in that content, because that's who you are. And that's going to help you with that relationship now and down the road.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you actually mentioned how COVID has provided an opportunity to further foster culture and connection. Could you share a little bit about how you've seen that help in really the sales pipeline process?
Sure. Well, I think that, it's been an evolution, right? I remember, middle of March as things started shutting down and offices started shutting down. There was a legit conversation, in the B2B sort of sales world of, is it ethical to be selling right now? Like, should we just sort of all cut it out for a minute and just let people, because it was, I think, we were all shell shocked for a little while. And I think, that it kind of evolved into what I guess would call a period of compassionate urgency. That none of us are going to get through this by just sitting back and hoping that it blows over. Like, we have to keep working, we have to keep moving, and we may adjust how we do that.
Yeah.
And the number of companies that are buying may have gone down. The nature of my buyer and the criteria they follow may have changed. Like in my business, like there were projects and deals that were need to have or nice to have at the end of Q1 that just didn't happen. People just they went into cash conservation mode. I'm not going to force that to happen. If I do, I'm definitely not going to get it later when the cash is available. And so there's a smaller percent of my buyers or my prospects that are able to buy right now, like cloud computing companies, software as a service companies, cybersecurity companies. They're not doing great, but they're doing okay, and they're continuing to spend. We had clients in hospitality. We had clients in a couple manufacturing spaces that have just been decimated. I probably should not call on them right now, right? And I also have to re-engineer how I'm thinking about selling based on a shorter time to value window, right? And I think for you guys, I mean, if I was in your shoes, the news yesterday that the 30-year fix is at a 50-year low. I mean, I get that some people are worried about sort of their jobs and worried about cash, but oh my goodness, like we just refinanced at the beginning of this year, and I'm like thinking, can I get another % down? Like, can I do this again in the second time in a year? I mean, those are conversations you want to have. And so you think about that if you have prospects where you're like, oh, we're trying to find out if the market's good, and we're like, well, we can only afford so much. You'd be like, let's do that math again. Because if you could get this rate, you might be able to get into the house you want, even in a market that's still doing pretty well. And I don't know nearly market conditions what you guys do, but my sister, she lives in the Bay Area, and they just did this. I mean, they've been looking for a couple of years, and they finally found a house that they thought was out of their price range, but the interest rates were low enough, and they're just like, it's time. Let's just do this. And that was in part because they had a great partner. They had a great realtor down there that wasn't pushing them to close, but knew what they mattered to them, knew why they hadn't been able to pull the trigger before. And actually, before I could talk to my sister, called and said, hey, the rates have gotten to a point where, you may not find the perfect house right now, but if you wouldn't mind going looking around a little bit, if you found something, this might be the time.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So actually, you and I talked a little bit about Ken Griffey. I'm saying this now. I'm not gonna let you tell the story yet because I want everyone to stick with me. Aaron, I think you have a question out there with our Facebook group.
Yeah, so a couple people were huge fans of that task list. So the first question is just, do you have a copy of that or like a template or something that we'd be able to share?
This is a Word doc. Encased in plastic, so I'm happy to either to James or Aaron, to you, or somebody. I'll send you the Word doc. It's not proprietary. It's kind of custom to me and my stuff, but you can at least see the categories and it goes from follow up things like just my schedule yesterday. Look at yesterday's calendar. Did I do my follow up with everybody? Do I owe anybody anything? Have I connected on the appropriate social channels with some of those people? Networking, saying happy birthday to people whose birthday it is. I mean, so I won't go through them all, but yeah, I'm happy to, anyone that wants, I'll send it to you and feel free to distribute it however you want.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And then also another question, do you have any tips on growing your audience or your network when you're just starting out? I think that can be a little bit hard for people because I think that sometimes it feels like you're talking to no one over and over when you're trying to market out there. So how do you kind of grow that network?
Well, so first of all, that's going to happen. You're going to have, if you're just starting out, like you might be talking in the wind a little bit. When I started my podcast for the first year or so, I'm like, I think people are listening. Like I'm looking at our numbers and I'm like, is this going anywhere? Like, here we're 5 years in and we've got over 100,000 subscribers. It just took time. It took a weekly podcast over 5 years to get there. So some of that is the case. Also, if you want to start building your audience more quickly, find people in your ecosystem that already have an audience and ask them to help you promote your content. Either, give them links and ask if they'll put it in their newsletter or promote it in their social feeds. Invite them to be part of your content, like do an interview with your mortgage broker partner, for example, about market conditions and why are rates so low and will this continue? And so like 10 questions about, the mortgage industry you need to know, in the middle of 2020. And if you do that with your mortgage broker, and if she has an audience and you publish that, she's going to want to promote that to her audience as well, right? And now they come and see you, and then you've got, follow me on LinkedIn, or you've got click here to subscribe to my newsletter. And so by having excuses and good content for people in your network that have an audience, it's a good way to start getting them exposed to your content. The other way to think about that is not just people in your immediate ecosystem, but if you're selling into the condo space, if you're focused on the east side, if you're focused in farm community, that audience we talked about before, that target persona you're going after, who else already has their attention? What are they interested in? And if you create content around that, or you sort of engage with people and co-create content or share links with other people that already have their attention, you can start getting more of that attention audience for yourself.
Well, thank you, Aaron. Thanks, Matt. Nick, you have a question out there.
Hey, Matt, how are you doing?
Hey.
Hey, got a question from Zoom. What has been the most impactful lesson you've learned in your career so far?
One, yeah, I think I'm a very values-driven guy. And when I first started the business, like I actually wrote down a set of values I thought were important to me. And as we've grown the business, our values are front and center. They're on our website and they're on our wall, but we give out awards for our values. Every one of our employees has a full-size Heinz Marketing football helmet. And we give out helmet stickers. So those of you familiar with like the college football tradition of putting stickers on helmets, every time we have a team meeting, we give out helmet stickers for exhibits of our values. It's not for, finishing this project or delighting this customer. It's like, when you did this, you were proactive and generous and results oriented, and therefore you get a helmet sticker. Big things, little things, doesn't matter. And we will hire, and in some cases fire, clients for not adhering to our values. I'm not willing to take money from someone that is not going to treat our people well, that's not going to treat our people with respect. And so I think that has been something that in some cases has been hard. We even, in 12 years of business, we've fired 4 clients. And of course they were larger, well-paying, paying on time clients, but showing the team that I was willing to stick to our values in those times versus just taking the money was, I think, an important part of, we've got my VP of client service with us for 10 years. We've got, people that have been with us for a while. I think it's because we've built a company that we're proud of, that we're excited to work at, but I'm proud of it and ourselves when we go home. And that means a lot to me.
Oh, thanks, Nick. And I just love that. I think that speaks volumes about you. In fact, someone on Facebook mentioned that you're likable. What did she say? She said, Matt, you are successful because you seem very real, and that's what people like. So that came from Sharon Jackson Mills. I thought that was pretty cool. She picked up on that pretty quick. So, and I did as well. So, okay, Ken Griffey's story. So I asked, just for context, I asked Matt, what's something that that everyone would be surprised that you have had happen in your life or you've done. And the very first thing he said is an interaction that he had with Ken Griffey. I want you to share this story. And by the way, I want you to share the advice.
The advice isn't nearly as good as the story, unfortunately, but no, I was, when I was in between my junior and senior year, I had 2 internships. I would wake up at like 5 in the morning, leave my apartment in Seattle, drive up to Everett, and I had a marketing intern in the Boeing wide body plant. And I was doing everything from PR to sales collateral. At one point I was on the little golf cart doing tours of the factory floor for VIPs. Like, it was fun. But about 2 o'clock, 2:30, I would leave Everett and I would drive down to, at the time the Mariner office was about 3 blocks away from the Kingdome, and I was a marketing intern for the Mariners. And I was working with the PR team. My job was mostly to help within the press box and do press related stuff, game day press stuff. And part of that job was, this is back in the day, there was a chalkboard in the press box. And so I had to go get the lineups from, at the time, Lou Piniella, and then whoever the visiting manager was, and I had to get their lineups and take them up and write them in chalk on the chalkboard in the press box so the press knew what the lineup was up there. So this one day I go down there, and Lou's door's closed, and you don't go in. It's just, he's having a coach's meeting, you don't go in. Right across from his office at the time at the Kingdome were two lockers that belonged to Ken Griffey, and he happened to be there the day, and he happened to be in a pretty good mood. Also standing there waiting to get in to talk to Lou was, I can't remember her maiden name, but if you watch the Mariner games, you've seen Angie Mentek on Root Sports. She's kind of a mainstay. She was engaged. She was about to get married, and Griffey knew that, and he just took that upon himself at that time to sort of give him. He looks at me and he says, "You married?" I said, "No." He said, "You got a girlfriend?" I said, "Yeah." And that girlfriend at the time became my wife. He said, "Well, I got some advice for both of you." And then he went off for a little while. It wasn't the most
profound.
Well, no, it wasn't the most profound, and it was something about like marrying someone young so you can control your woman. It wasn't really the greatest advice in the world. I know.
I don't know if I should ask you to tell.
It's no holds barred. So it wasn't. Look, it was, it was the younger.
Okay, gotcha.
Hopefully got better. But no, I was. I usually don't tell that part of the story. Maybe I shouldn't have. But it was. it's one of those things you'll never forget. And when, when I was what, like 20, 21, and I'm sitting here talking to Ken Griffey Jr. and, getting to
Yeah.
meet. I mean, the other interesting story, I remember this different day. It was earlier and there was no one in the ballpark yet. It was probably 3.5 hours before the game. And I had to go from the Mariner locker room, which was on the third base side, to the visitor locker room for something. And I just, you go out the dugout, and the fastest way is just to go across field, dugout to dugout. So I'm getting out of the dugout, walking across, and all of a sudden I notice something that's on the corner of my eye. There's something on the jumbotron, and it's moving. I look up there, and I'm like, that's a video game. And I look behind me. There's Griffey, had gotten one of the clubhouse guys to connect his Sega system to the jumbotron. So he's sitting in the dugout, just playing whatever the game was on the jumbotron. I'll never forget that.
Well, that's powerful. I mean, to play on a jumbotron, like a little basic video game.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, so my last question, just to kind of humanize you to the group. Not that you are not human already to us, but tell us who your hero is.
I would say my heroes are my parents. I'm really very, very thankful of the opportunities they gave me growing up. We didn't have a lot. We weren't rich. We weren't poor. But they made us feel loved. They encouraged us to do things we were interested in. They weren't always things that they were interested in, or weren't always things that they thought we were going to be interested in. And they weren't perfect, but I think, I feel so blessed that they had them in my life. And, my dad's passed, my mom's still alive. She lives down the Bay Area, but we have 3 kids. And I just, every day think about especially since we're all cooped up here now every day, how do I want to be a parent? How do I want to create values with my kids? How do I want them to grow up, and what legacy do I want them to have from thinking about their childhood? So I feel very thankful that I have that as a foundation.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, how can the group learn more about you, get some of your books, engage your help?
So, so first of all, I really appreciate doing this. This has been a lot of fun. It's been an honor to do this. Like I said, been a fan of you guys forever. I put it in the beginning of the chat. My very first house we bought through John L. Scott. My wife and I, we were living separate places in Seattle. Before we got married, I was at Microsoft. She still teaches in Shoreline, and Kirkland was in the middle. And we got a referral to a John L. Scott agent. I don't know if she's still with you, Sally Gregg, who was doing a lot of work, mostly in Bellevue. And we got a referral through her from someone who knew her. She was selling houses that were like many times more than we could afford. And I thought there was no way she'd work with us. She's like, oh no, you were a referral from someone I trust. She treated us like the most important person. And we had no idea what we were doing. And I'll never forget the day she said, it was a Saturday. She said, we'll go look at houses. And we meet with her, and she's like, we're going to find your house today. And I'm thinking, like, Sally, I like you a lot. Like, I'm sure you're really good. There's no way. I mean, there's a lot of houses out there. Second house we looked at was the house that we bought. And she just did a fantastic job. And she did such a great job of following up. We've given her a bunch of referrals, and she's just been fantastic. So great experience with John Scott. So the least I could do to do this with you guys today, I would say, in terms of our website, HeinzMarketing.com, I mean, we tend to lean towards more sort of B2B kind of marketing, but it's all available for free. We've got a library of research and best practice guides and some social media guides. The predictable pipeline at this point coming out in February, but I'll put a link into the chat. It's available for pre-order on Amazon. So if you want to copy that, that's certainly available. Our Twitter feed, just at Heinz Marketing, is every day we're kind of curating things we read across the company about sales and marketing out into the market. And honestly, if anyone has a question, please feel free to reach out. I'm just Matt, M-A-T-T, at HeinzMarketing.com.
Absolutely. Well, on behalf of all of John L. Scott and our Facebook Friday team, Lennox Scott, our chairman and CEO, and just all of us, thank you so much for joining us today and providing this valuable insight as well as inspiration for keeping ourselves accountable in the pipeline process. It's just been a joy to meet with you, and I appreciate just all that you've shared, including about your farmhouse and about your marriage advice. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, moderators.
Leave that out. The rest of it's all good.
Thank you, moderators, Aaron and Nick, both at the Facebook group as well as the Zoom, and the thousands of people that join our show through Facebook as well as Zoom, and our office leaders and our owners and agents and brokers. Lennox Scott, Phil McBride, who joined our show as well today. Thanks, Lennox, for your questions. And all of you, and just look forward to next week with Stefan Swanepoel as well as Greg Markov. Greg's a negotiation expert. He'll be talking for the first 30 minutes, and then for the second 30 minutes, we're going to have, as Stefan calls it, a fireside chat with Lennox Scott. So we'll go from 11:30 to 12 with Stefan. That's a real honor for us to have these guys on the show and talking about the market, both locally as well as nationally, and just some opportunities coming up, as well as the recovery. So going to be a great show next week. As always, live life as a contribution, John L. Scott's core value. And thank you so much, Matt, for joining us again. And I appreciate you. And if anyone has more questions for Matt or wants to be put in contact, just shoot me an email. And if you're interested in franchise opportunities within John L. Scott, my email is jamescolburn@johnlscott.com. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for joining us, and have a wonderful week, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Talk to you soon.